Hi all, let's have a look at another fascinating and instructive game from the Magnus Carlsen Invitational tournament. This was in the final 4 games, round 11, so Hikaru Nakamura playing Magnus Carlsen. Could he get revenge in this game with the white pieces? Let's have a look at what happened. So d4 from Hikaru Nakamura, we have Magnus playing knight f6, c4 e6, knight f3, we have d5, so it's transposing into a queen's gambit declined. Now this very trendy bishop f4 move. Over the last few years this has shot up in popularity. Black castles, e3, knight bd7, and now c5. Sometimes, you've got to be careful with c5 because sometimes black can react with later e5 and ed and weaken this pawn chain. This has to be very carefully judged, this kind of move. We have knight h5, and this is well-trodden territory. White plays bishop d3 here, letting the bishop be taken. In exchange, white gets, now after knight takes f4, e takes f4, a very interesting outpost square on e5. You see it's on that semi-open file. There's also the possibility of white playing for f5 as well, which might undermine and weaken the black pawn chain. So there's a few perks of this, accepting the double pawns here. And let me show you this quotation I've chosen just for this game. Seize the outpost king 5, which is the old notation for e5, pawn to king 5. For example, you say instead of e4, e5. So k5 is king's 5th. So e5 in new notation. Seize that with your knight, and you can go to sleep. Checkmate will come by itself, and it's one of my favourite people with quotations, Saveli Tartakoa, who had a very humorous and witty reputation. I think he was very, very popular. I get the impression he was one of the hypermoderns, in fact, bringing new ideas to the game. The hypermoderns were trying to find exciting, original, and useful exceptions to current theory. So we have, anyway, b6. We have b4, a5, a3. So because the queen is protecting the rook, this is afforded. So a takes is not a disaster for white. We have c6. This is well trodden though, this position, white castles. Now here, in this particular position, the usual move, and this is an opening which Levon Aronian has played quite a few times with the black pieces. Queen c7 has been chosen in this particular position by Levon Aronian against Giri. So that was Giri Levon Aronian in Paris 2016. And that game, let's have a look at it. So it encourages g3 from white because it's hitting the pawn. And then, and only then, bishop a6. So this creates a situation where you'll note that in this game continuation, stem game, that black managed to make sure after knight e5 there was only a pawn on e5, maintaining an outpost with a more painful kind of piece. Is something more ambitious because it would exert continuing pressure. Imagine the knight's on e5. It will exert continuing pressure in the opposing camp. So it makes that kind of outpost square with a pawn less of a pain, less dangerous in a way. And in fact, the game, I know this might be shocking with Giri involved, but it ended up as a draw. Yeah, it's a lot of Giri's got a reputation for being slightly drawish. It ended up in a peaceful draw. Okay, so with perpetual check. So I think both sides were very happy there. So anyway, in this game, Hikaru Nakamura against Magnus. Magnus doesn't actually play queen c7. So it makes the game very interesting, actually. Bishop a6 immediately. So this doesn't encourage g3. It doesn't maybe ensure that committal decision. We have queen e2, bishop takes, queen takes. And now, in fact, g6, because there might be an f5 from white. So it clamps down on that at the cost of the dark squares being slightly weakened. This position also has been seen. We're still in territory seen before. There is a game queen c7 here, so it's been delayed to encourage g3. And black actually went on to win that game. That was Abjapar against Bachelon in a tournament in 2015. But so black went on to win that. So, okay, So g6 here, though, we have rook fc1, and now queen c7 is played here, knowing that f5 has been stopped. So g3, a takes, queen b7, rook ab1, rook a3 from Magnus pinning that knight, queen c2, rook fa8, king g2, bishop f6, knight e2, and this is a very, very interesting key move, it seems. White would really like an outpost on e5 with a piece, not a pawn. As the Giri stem game shows, it can be quite drawish if there's a pawn on e5. And this might have an intent later to get a knight to e5 at some point. But at the moment, there are two pieces covering e5. But watch this square, the e5 square. So rook a2, queen d1, b takes, so that hits the queen. Queen a6, rook c2. So it seems as though some peaceful exchanges of all the rooks. The knight for a moment is out of control of the e5 square right now. Knight c1, this is rerouting to try and get an e5 knight outpost. So knight c7, knight d3, queen b5. But at the moment, the two pieces are guardian angels of the e5 square. They're ready to leave white with just a pawn, the harmless pawn on e5. Queen c3 is played. We have h5, queen a3, king g7. And actually, here, in fact, knight de5 is played. And black, doesn't want to tolerate this knight, so does take on e5 with the bishop. We have f takes, queen e2. So it seems as though black should be on the way to equalizing. So even though white wanted, an outpost on e5, it's not happened. Is this just going to be a draw? Is Magnus going to draw with black pieces here? Because the rooks have come off, everything seems to have come off. White's space advantage is compensated. Black might have some chances here, even for a perpetual check sometimes. We have knight g5 though, queen g4, h4. So we do have a knight outpost on g5 instead. So is this annoying? It's annoying in that the e6 pawn could become very vulnerable sometimes on f6. We have knight f8, queen d3, queen f5, and here is a critical moment of the game, it seems. Hikaru played queen takes f5. Now, it seems here what was played is enticing for black to challenge the g5 outpost knight. Magnus played e takes. It seems, to challenge this knight would be, in theory, desirable to some extent. It turns out, technically, g takes f5 might have actually been the safer bet. The problem with e takes f5 contextually, if we don't just look at the move, but what it represents in terms of the whole context of the position here, white does have that liberating e6, that mobile e5 pawn. In contrast here, where white's pawns are not that mobile. So it's interesting. So for example, knight f3, not only that, black might be able to play here. Can you see what black could positionally consider in this position? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, because this is a very interesting equalization strategy in this variation. What could black play, you think? Okay, it turns out there's a positional pawn sack available, f4, because after knight g6, here, knight e7, this is a remarkably good outpost square. And d4 is kind of the backward pawn in white's position, in that there's no pawn supporting d4. So this should guarantee equality for black. So there are some interesting dynamic perks as well of g takes. It's very, very difficult though at this time control to consider this stuff. So it seems, okay, in this context situation, the e pawn is mobile. We have king f3, and now f6 is played. On knight d7, we can see a danger with e6. For example, here, where c6 is a problem, and also the white king can threaten to come in on the dark squares. So the combination of the annoying knight and the king can actually break through at some point. For example, around here, black's going to crack, and if black tried to persist holding things with king h7, holding c6 for longer, the king just infiltrates. So this combination of the knight and king is pretty lethal here. It's a lethal combination. So yeah, it seems knight d6 allowing e6 is asking for trouble. So we have this f6 move instead. And now after e takes, you'll note that this outpost square is now available. The pawn's gone from that outpost square, and it could be replaced with quite a painful piece potentially. King takes, king e3, knight d7. But again, it looks as though, well, black's contesting that outpost square with the knight. So isn't this mostly harmless? We have knight e1, knight b8, knight d3, king f6, f4, knight d7, and here's a crucial moment, knight e5. And does black tolerate this knight or take it? There's a big snag, though, in this particular position. That is a horrible knight to have to, bear the pressure on all these squares, particularly g6 and c6. But Magnus plays knight f8. The problem is, if knight takes e5, the king infiltration possibilities on the dark squares is enhanced after f takes, not d takes, but f takes. On d takes, it will just be mostly harmless. This is just an equalish position. The interesting thing is, though, on f takes, it's very different. It's a very, very different picture, where zugzwang could be a very, very powerful weapon for white. If we reach this position, there's a zugzwang. Black's going to end up losing material after king h6, and then things start breaking with white winning. Here, if instead of knight takes e5, knight b8, or sorry, knight f8, we have knight b8, the problem with this is that the king could venture on the queen side like this, and the knights all that outpost is torturing g6. g6 could be taken at any time, basically, it seems. So we're winning for white. So this is a very, very difficult position now after knight e5. So knight f8, losing that c6 pawn. And it's just very, very difficult for Magnus Carlsen now to try and defend this position. So let's have a look what happens. So pressure on d5. The king's still coming in, improving the position for white. Okay, the g3 pawn is attacked. So exchange of prisoners there, d5 for g3. But still, these two are holding up these three, if you look at this. Whilst white now has two connected passed pawns already on the board and starts pushing them, and they're very, very dangerous. And now, yeah, it's all over. Black's falling apart here after this check. So it seems actually that although the e5 outpost, in theory, it's something wonderful. You really want a peace outpost to torture the opponent as much as possible. In practice, it's usually a pawn outpost. And initially it was just unveiled as later as a square available for the knight again after this e takes happened, and then it was really painful again. So it's quite a fascinating battle revolving around the e5 square in this particular opening variation, because those double pawns do amplify the e5 square. It's on the semi-open file. It's one of the perks of the double pawns, this strategy around e5 here, which I thought is quite instructive. It's actually very, very easy to miss, by the way, the philosophical points that these games might represent, which is a shame. I'm glad I didn't try and do this game yesterday. I think it only started clicking with me, some of the points of this game about the battle. When you look at the stem game in particular, what's been happening, how black equalizes, and it provides, maybe subtly a word of caution around e5, how you recapture. So the critical mistake was actually letting some pawn mobility creep into the equation with e6 instead of, perhaps you could argue, the more ugly recapture, which didn't have pawn mobility and also had the possibility of a dynamic pawn sacrifice with f4. So fascinating stuff. chess is really a beautiful game with tons of ideas and resources and subtleties. So I'm hoping, you know, we can get a lesson even from this rapid game. This very, very high level rapid game though, between two world-class super grandmasters. Well, more than world-class, the elite of the elite. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as me. If you want to challenge me for a game, Kingscrusher.tv. If you just register there, I'll be able to invite you later, or bit.ly if you prefer, bit.ly/chessworld, bit.ly/chessworld. There's also these playlists at Kingscrusher.tv/discord. Sorry, that's not a playlist, that's a Suave chat forum. But playlists at bit.ly/LeelaChess, bit.ly/StockfishChess, bit.ly/Magnus Carlsen Chess. Okay, comments, questions, likes, shares, always appreciated. And now with the score 1-1, I'm wanting to cover the next two games soon, once I can get the points which are really interesting for us to incorporate into our own games especially. Okay, thanks very much.